It says it's now broadcasting to all attendees.
Great.
So.
Oh, and we have attendees. Hello, attendees. Oh, they're here.
They're starting to come into the room. I think they are waiting in a little waiting area, and they're going to be coming in now that we've turned it on.
Yeah, there are people. Some of them are my people. Hello, my people. I'm going to stop looking at that because that'll be really distracting.
Yeah, believe me, that's, good idea. So we'll start in about a minute once we get everyone loaded in the room.
How's my light? Is my light okay?
Your light's going to put myself on mute for about a minute.
I don't have any more light than this, so this is what I got.
No, the paintings behind you, Susan, look beautiful.
I know, I'm so happy with them.
They're beautiful.
Really. Oh, I'm really mad at, what is it, Pro Art, who does the tapes. Because I've been buying their drafting tape for years and years and years. And this roll bled all over the place. It's horrible.
Ooh.
I'm gonna have to mask it off and like paint over it because I like to sign outside of my pieces on the white, and then I sign outside on the white, and so now I'm gonna have to either choose not to do that or fix it. So
no, they're really
angry that are email for me about it. So yeah. But yeah, so
we're going to give people probably like another minute to just to get here, and then okay, we're climbing. So you live in Lambertville in a beautiful idyllic spot, Lisa was telling me.
Yes, yeah, it's actually kind of up the hill. Not Goat Hill, a little bit past that, but still kind of technically West Amwell, but technically like it's Lambertville and whatever it is. But yeah, it's all wooded. I actually, if you go back on my Instagram and my Facebook images, I've actually painted gigantic poppies along the front of my little cottage.
Maria, do we want to start?
Sure, yeah. All right, so welcome everybody. Here we are in another In Conversation, and thank you for joining us tonight. And we are very, very happy to have artist Susan DiConcini with us tonight. And she is an artist who is based in Lambertville, and she is very accomplished in her own right, as you will see. And she's also a scenic artist for McCarter Theatre. So the Arts Council has been very blessed with a great relationship with McCarter, and we have started this new program within the last year called Art of the Script, and Susan has been a big participant of that, and it's organized by Carrie Ballinger, and artists come and get the script from the Arts Council. They read the script and they make art inspired by the featured play at McCarter. And it has started somewhat slow, but before the pandemic hit, it was gaining speed. And we are really excited about that program, and we hope to get back to it. But Susan is a terrific artist, as you're going to find out in a few minutes, and she is interviewed by our host, Tim Andrews. And Tim has been a past board president of the Arts Council, and he is a big supporter, the main supporter of our Artist in Residency program. And he also serves on the McCarter board. So we have a very nice confluence of organizations tonight. And I just want to thank everybody for joining. I won't take too much time because these In Conversations go so quick. So I'm going to get off of here and let Tim and Susan have a conversation, and please enjoy.
Great. Thank you very much, Maria.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome, Susan. So nice to meet you virtually.
Yes, nice to meet you.
So let's get started. First, I would just remind the audience that if they want to leave a question during the session, There's a box on the right-hand side that you can type your questions in, and I'll be monitoring that in that chat window, and we'll be asking Susan questions that you're posing along with my own. So first, let's sort of get started. Tell us about, where you were born and sort of, your early years.
I grew up in Maple Shade, New Jersey. And all of my family basically lived within practically 15 minutes of each other. So my entire childhood was hanging out with my cousins and going to my grandmother's for dinner and all kinds of things like that. Then we moved to Cinnaminson when I was in 5th grade, and that's where I grew up. And yeah, so I'm a South Jersey girl, just
Great.
Come a little bit north, but yeah. And
so when do you remember the earliest interest in art? Was it super early, in your first 5 years? What's your memory of sort of art and sort of getting involved in art?
I don't think I was ever not interested in art. I just didn't super focus on it, I guess. I mean, I had an amazing art teacher that actually her son was about a year ahead of me in school, and she was my art teacher from like kindergarten all the way through 7th grade. She actually got a job at the high school when he went to high school, so there was only 1 year that she wasn't my art teacher. And so I had a pretty and then later on I actually went on a chaperoned a Europe trip, and she was my roommate. We just had a blast. I don't know. So she's a huge influence. I mean, I've always been drawn. I've been drawn visually to things always, but I didn't really think about it. I could draw, I could paint, but I didn't really think about it until college when my major was in theater, specifically scenic design, which if you're going to scenic design, you need to be able to draw. I also painted all the sets. And then I got a fine art minor because reasons, I don't know, but
and so
it makes sense in my brain. I can see it. Does it make sense?
How did you get into the theatrical piece of that? Was that something from high school, or when did you start getting into theater and designing sets?
Theater is probably my venue to art specifically. I went and saw a show when I was in 2nd grade. Is the first time I remember specifically seeing it and being like, wow, that was amazing, and I want to do that. And so all the shows, and then once my parents, specifically my dad, are super into live theater. They've just loved it. And so once I started showing an interest in it, it was like, oh, well, we should go see live theater. I think the first professional thing I saw was we went and saw a touring production of Camelot in Philly. And Robert Goulet, who was the original Lancelot on Broadway, was actually doing Arthur. So that was really it's kind of fed into that. And then I did it all through high school. And in high school is when I was in all the shows, but
were you
acted. Who doesn't act in high school? But
I didn't for the
I
record.
liked all the rest of it more. And then when I got to college and started painting, I think the second I was doing props for a while, but then I basically painted all the sets in college. And painting, it was one of those things where painting it makes sense in my brain. I understand how to paint things.
And where'd you go to school?
It's a little place in Ohio, Cedarville University. Nobody's heard of it, so, but yeah.
And do they specialize in theatrical?
No, what they had is they had just gotten they had just built a brand new theater, but their program wasn't humongous. So they had all this state-of-the-art stuff, but not tons and tons of people, so you got to do everything. So.
Great. And in doing backdrops and scenes in a theatrical setting, what's the process for that? I mean, how does the artist work with the playwright, the director? Sort of, how does that work? What's that process look like?
So specifically, it is the designer that works with the director to figure out what what is wanted, what kind of you can make atmospherically. Now, specifically with backdrops, which I think backdrops are very much like watercolor paintings, especially if you have to do things that are translucent, because a translucent drop is something that's painted on a muslin, so it looks solid from the front, but then you can light it from the back. So it has to be kind of translucent enough that you can do different scenes, which also means you can't mess up. Like you have to, or if you do mess up, you have to make it work. Like you can't paint over it with another color because that will look solid and dark and like a silhouette. So there's a certain amount of planning involved. And I mean, with any of the scenic painting, which is, my brain really likes that part of the process, the like figuring it out how to do it in layers and in steps.
So explain that process. I didn't quite catch that entire process. So it's in layers on one piece of muslin, or it's multiple pieces and the lighting changes what people see from the audience?
Well, okay, so what you do is you have a backdrop sized piece of muslin, or it, you know, has seams in it, but if you want translucent, you don't want seams. And so, I mean, it's, you know, it can be 50, I mean, I can't remember the biggest, 50, like a wall size, humongous. So what you do is you starch it, which means that so if you think about a weave like this, the starch sets down into the holes so that when you paint, the paint sits on top and doesn't go into the holes. So if you fill the holes, then the light won't shine through it. So you're almost like it's more like glazes than it is painting. So, and in fact, if you're super awesome, you can do a picture on the front of a muslin drop and one on the back side, a completely different picture. And depending on the way it's lit, you either see one, you see the other, or you can see both kind of through it. So,
oh, interesting. Wow.
Super fancy.
Yeah, that's
really can't mess up.
That sounds so super cool. So, so how does that process work to decide what that setting looks like, and how much leeway does the artist have from the director? You know, you're talking about a play and, okay, this is what the kind of scene is I'm trying to create, or the director's sort of relating whatever. And what's that interaction?
It very much depends on it's the relationship between the director and the designer. We almost entirely talk through to the designer, and the designer is responsible for talking to the director. The director, now some directors are very, very specific about what they want. And some directors are very much like into the collaborative process. Like, what are your ideas? What are your ideas? And so hopefully, the hope is always that they've had a big, long, many discussions that go back and forth before we get any imagery. Now, normally we hope for a rendering, which is like, here is a picture of exactly what I want from you. Now, sometimes they can be hand painted, beautiful. Like we've had one, John Lee Beatty, who's done a million things. He most recently designed, we did Age of Innocence at McCarter, but Tally's Folly, which was years and years ago at McCarter, but we actually reproduced his Broadway set again. He gave us a beautiful hand-painted rendering, which was basically a watercolor, and we just made that into a drop. And that was mostly Carrie, because I was a baby then, and I didn't really know that much about it, but he did help.
And so if you take something that's fairly small, I presume that size that you're describing is
the scale. It's
the scale.
So we just,
And then sort of how do you make it big? Like, what's that process look like? I mean,
normally we use a grid. Like, you know, like you would grid, like if you're trying to reproduce something, grid, you do it gigantic, usually 2 foot by 2 foot squares. But if it's very precise, we'll do smaller.
Okay.
We also sometimes, occasionally, if you remember Mrs. Packard. At McCarter,
that's been a long time ago.
Island with Eugene Lee. That was actually, we did a backdrop that was supposed to be like a woodcut. And so we actually projected onto brown paper and made stencils. We like cut out stencil, but we projected, drew, and then took it down and cut it and laid it all out on the drop and sprayed it like a stencil.
And how many people would work on something like that, say at McCarter? Many people probably who are tuning in now and listening to this discussion probably have been at McCarter. So that's a huge stage, at least to somebody that knows McCarter. It looks like a huge stage. How many people would be involved in that kind of a process, and how long would that take?
It does depend on the drop. Okay, for instance, Gods of Comedy, which was decently recent. That tree drop in the college campus, that was partially translucent. right? So light came through it and hit it from the front. I think we had 4 or 5. We were trying to, that was a big set, so we were really pushing. I think we had 4 or 5 people painting that at once. But normally, I mean, if you think about the understudy, which was a couple of years earlier, there was several backdrops in that weren't very intense. And so like I took a backdrop in that corner and Carrie took a backdrop in this corner, and we did them ourselves. So a lot of the drops Carrie and I can get done ourselves, but sometimes if they're more intense or we're crunched on time, we'll use more people. There were more people, Figaro, I'm spacing on the word, but like right in the very front of the stage, there was a drop it was partially hard drop and partially a soft drop. And that we had multiple people on because we were just crunched.
Okay, I sort of jumped ahead, but so you were in college and you fell in love with this form of art and expression. So what happened, you know, so you graduated from college and then what happened? What was the next step?
Well, so I kind of came out of college with, like, we had so much budget, and because it was a decently new, the program had kind of exploded. So we had a bunch of money, but not a lot of somebody to say, hey, are you spending too much on that? So we just poured money into sets. So I had beautiful pictures of all the sets that I painted. And so I came to McCarter specifically. I mean, I sent stuff out to a bunch of places, but Carrie called me in and she said, oh, these pictures are beautiful. Can you do all of this? And I said, I did do all of that. And so on the merit of my pictures, I started at McCarter over hire and worked for them. I worked for a bunch of little places. I worked for Passage in Trenton. I worked for Lantern Theater in Philly. I think Burlington County College. I've done a bunch of stuff all over, but mostly my heart was at McCarter.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at some of your work in just a few minutes. So let's talk about, you know, what you've used to paint. So a lot of your work is in watercolor, but sort of talk about why watercolor and why that works for you versus oil versus, you know, other kinds of forms of media.
Well, I like watercolor because, like I said, there's a certain amount of, I would call it performance. You can't really mess it up. You have to think it through. And I specifically don't tend to use white gouache to fix things. There's nothing wrong with that. It just, I'd rather plan things out enough that I don't have to. So that's something very interesting to me. Like if you mess up, you kind of have to make it work. So yeah, and it works in layers and glazes. So almost everything you do, you see the last thing that you did through it. So if you do watch any of my time lapses that I do, because I'm super into time lapse, you'll see that I do mask out on my highlights, do lighter colors, then skip immediately to my dark darks. And then once I have the whole thing figured out, I kind of marry all the things together with big washes at the end.
So let's look at one of your time lapses right now, actually. So let me just sort of see if I can get this to go and be shared. 1 second here.
Of course, it's the one that I forgot to put music to, I think. So sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Let me just sort of see if I can get the sharing to work here. 1 second. Okay. I think I've got it down here. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping people can see this.
I can see it if that helps.
Great. So tell us what's going on here, really. You can talk slower than the time lapse is going. Why don't you tell us what's happening here?
I'm not seeing anything moving.
Oh, that's
I just see your mouse moving. You might have to select it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. And unfortunately, I'm not sure. Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to try that again.
Okay, I can just, oh, there we go. Okay. Push it over a little more maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, I speed them up a lot because I don't I don't have an attention span. So what you can see is I've already masked out the masking in that yellow, and then I put in the darker the waves, and then I start moving into lighter. And then when I've decided that I have had enough, and then I start doing these giant washes to marry the whole wave together. So that's what's happening there. And that's pretty much my process for almost all my water.
So I'm just going to rewind this. Just again, I'm going to go through. I'm going to stop it every so often. You sort of tell us a bit more about
that's
the
really
process.
fine. The only reason I do it that fast is because I have no patience on people's videos, so I don't expect people to have patience for mine.
So it looks like you're doing a little bit of work right here. So tell us about what the first step is.
Okay, so if you actually look right to the, like in the middle, you can see there's kind of a yellowy up at the top middle. There's like that yellowy bit. That actually, I've put masking fluid down to mask off. Actually, I can do this. Ready? Look at me. I'm moving. I have the painting right here. So, so here's the painting, right?
Yeah.
What I've done is I masked off all of the white here. And then, so once I've masked off all the white, and I also masked off a bunch in the bottom, is I actually start painting in the, like these big washes before I do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Go through that again. So so go through that again.
Okay. Coming back to where there's more light.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So up here where there's all this splashing, right?
Yeah.
I use masking fluid, which is, it's almost like rubber cement.
Oh, can you hold on one second? Somebody's saying they cannot see you. So let me just make sure that I've stopped sharing my screen, which I think I have stopped sharing. Can someone else tell me if you can see us?
I can see you, Tim and Susan. Yeah.
Okay, great. Somebody just had said they couldn't see. So go ahead, Susan.
Okay. So what I do is it's almost like a rubber cement. It's masking fluid. So what you do is you can put it on, once you decide where your highlights are, you can put it on, and basically anything you paint over it will resist. It's like it's like a stencil almost. So what I do is I figure out where that's gonna be. I mask that out, and sometimes I'll do that blue wash in the video was really light, and then I'll mask it again to add kind of a double masking. Then I'll do all of my dark patches, all the like dark into the waves here. And then I just keep building on top of it. And at some point, actually, if you look at these guys right here, so I masked all these, did all the painting, pulled up all the masking fluid, and then I actually have these, they're like scrubber brushes. They're like kind of really rough, and you can like almost soften, because a lot of times masking fluid leaves a really hard edge, and so you can kind of soften with the scrubber brushes. That answer the question? You're muted, I think.
Okay, great. So so I think that's a triptych behind you, right?
Yes, this is my brand new triptych.
So tell us about this, and also you focus so much on clouds and water as two of your subjects. So tell us a bit about the triptych behind you, what your inspiration was to that, and why water.
So specifically, well, being a scenic artist, I like to work large scale. So I'm actually much more comfortable working larger than I am super small. But I also have these little travel notebooks that I travel with that I like to, like if you park it for a while somewhere and you paint a scene, like kind of, I take pictures too, but I like to do like a little painting. It kind of captures a little bit more of the ambiance for me.
And I'm sharing one of those right now. So if you look right now, I think this is.
Oh no, these are okay. So yes, this is one of them. Yeah. But these are the kind of pictures where I was like, you know what? I'm not great at clouds. Terrible at clouds. So I should get better at clouds. So what I did was because I also don't like to waste paper. So I started doing these little 3x3 paintings to learn how to paint clouds. And I actually did if you keep going through the pictures, we'll get to a bunch of them. I went through, I think I did about 77 of them in a month.
And were you actually seeing clouds somewhere and you were copying what you were seeing, or were you just from your imagination?
In my sketchbook,
Yeah.
I was painting what I was seeing, but to learn how to paint clouds, I was using reference images because they stay still. So yeah, I was doing that. So
so let me scroll back here, and this is another piece very similar to, I think, the one you just showed us, correct?
that is the same piece.
Okay. And how long
I
is this?
think it might be out of order. Sorry.
I sort of create my own order with your work. So so how long would this take? Like, what's your process and how long does it take?
How long to paint that size painting?
Yeah, because you were talking about you don't have any patience, and you sort of this speed is such an important thing to you. So do you create art quickly as well?
I do. And for me, it's not just about, it's more about speed in the moment. So I'm sure you've seen people who paint, you see like they've sketched out this big painting and then they fully realize the eye and then they fully realize the other eye, or the people who do my cousin, who's amazing, he will do the like pointillism with like a ballpoint pen.
Yeah.
And I can't. Everything has to, actually this triptych, which is great, I was almost to the point where I was like, all these steps are taking too long because there's too many. I had to do it to 3 paintings instead of just 1 painting.
Yeah.
I muscled through it, but it's more for me about each step has to be decently quick, which is probably why I work in layers the way that I do. Like if you looked at the
So like this piece, how many layers would this piece be, you think?
well, that's the one that's in the video. So that's masking, doing a base color, masking again, dark shadows, middle shadows, big washes, which is probably 2 steps, scrubbing out. So 8 steps.
Okay. And over what period of time is that?
Well, okay, so for me, also working as a scenic artist, a lot of it is in dry time. So in my brain, dry time doesn't quite count.
Yeah.
Like it's important that it gets, in scenic painting, it's important that it gets done by a certain time, but in my head, it's hands-on time. So I think that one I calculated, it's about 8 hours, 5 hours of hands-on time. I use that by using my videos that I do. I like reverse engineer the time lapsing, but that doesn't count any sort of, that doesn't count the like cutting the paper to size, taping it out. It doesn't include the masking because I don't, and the like drawing it out because I don't, that makes for boring video, so I don't take video of that. So I feel like hands-on, it's 8 hours, but it is probably on my table for 5 or 6 days, 6 days, something like that. So,
which sounds, to somebody who's not an artist, and I'm not an artist, it just sounds like a miracle, frankly, that you can produce something that beautiful in such a, frankly, short period of time. I think this is probably one of the sketches you were talking about as well in a book.
yes,
right?
yeah, that was me learning clouds, going, these are okay, but I should get better. But yeah, those are my little sketch pads. You can see my little, I have a little travel kit of painting.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all the half pans. They have magnets on the bottom of them. So when they're empty, I can pop them out and pop new ones in. And I work with I mean, you can see I even have 3 empty holes in it. I actually prefer to work with less colors versus more colors.
Why is that?
I like to mix my own. Actually, if you look right up here, I make my own recipes.
Let's switch. We're going to switch to you now. Just let me, I'll stop sharing and then you'll be a bigger screen. So
yeah.
Okay.
I put recipes up here. And in my studio, I like to work with liquid watercolors. I really like the Dr. P.H. Martin's liquid watercolors. They actually have they're already liquid, so I don't have to add my own water, and they have eyedroppers. So that way they're super saturated, because I like my watercolors really saturated. And I don't have to worry about, did I add the right amount of water or not? Like they are liquid, but they're already super saturated, so I can use my my recipes and come up with the exact color that I want. It also is good for like, okay, for this, which is a triptych, I had to keep mixing the same color over and over again. So I don't like to waste any colors. So I try to just mix it when I need it, as opposed to mixing a giant amount of it and wasting it. So.
And that gives you consistency, I presume, too, right?
Yep.
In color.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you mentioned Book of Clouds. Do you have that handy that we could go through, or you think we can do that? Let's do that.
So I mean, this, because I've sold some of the paintings, it might not be super dense. But let me try and find it.
Selling is always good. We'll get to how you market your stuff later.
So anyway, I have, if you can see,
get a little
there
closer.
are a bunch of paintings of clouds, and it's just every kind of cloud you can think about. So sunset, storms, weird green skies, blue skies, over ocean, over water, purpley.
Beautiful.
Like that. I actually did a bunch that are kind of like, they're all on one piece of paper. So this one's, I don't know.
So like a film strip.
Yeah. I actually considered, and Carrie was the one who said this, doing like a development of like a tornado.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But I kind of got sucked into water and
so you
as many clouds recently.
You mentioned you like big scale, and yet you've got all this work that's quite small.
Well,
so,
that's part of me being not good at clouds. I wanted to not waste paper. So I did, it's easier to work tiny, well, I mean, we'll do this with painting. You do a sample before you do a larger piece so that you don't waste it and you know what you're gonna do.
I think I have a second view of this as well that I'm going to show folks right now, which is, I suspect, part of that work.
Yeah, that was me. I did 77 of them in about a month.
Wow.
And I told some of my artist friends, I was like, oh yeah, I really wanted to learn how to paint clouds. So I painted a bunch of them, like 77 in a month, like you do. And they were like, no, Sue, no one does that.
So, and how do you feel that you are with clouds now after all that?
I'm not afraid of clouds anymore. Also, clouds are really hard because clouds don't make any sense. Like you look at clouds and you say, if I painted that, no one would believe me.
Oh.
And so as scenic artists, you have to be able to paint anything, anytime. So, and clouds drops are definitely part of that. And so I'd rather be good at clouds before I'm asked to do them than after the fact.
So if a cloud can look like anything and you can't imagine how it looks, how is it you could do a cloud wrong? Or how could you,
when you take anything three-dimensional and you make it two-dimensional, you're not actually, with the exception of like botanists and people that paint things for study, you are trying to tell the person's eyes what that cloud looked like. It has to look like a cloud though.
Yeah. You
can paint blobs in all the right spaces and it might not look like a cloud. That you have to, so there's a certain amount of artistic license in making it look like a cloud.
So you have to, so you're envisioning it in 3D and then you have to use your talent to render it in 2 so we see 3.
Yeah.
Is that really what's happening?
Well, yeah, you're just trying to make a 2D surface explain it in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
Cool. If you can. That's the quest.
I think you're great at your quest. Let's go and look at a couple of others.
Yeah,
Let's
so
talk
that's
just a little bit about this.
Yeah, that's one of my larger clouds. That's an 11 by 14. Yeah.
And what are you using here? I mean, you're using the droppers and also brush. It looks softer than brushes, but is it still a brush?
So with clouds, I usually work really wet. So with the water, what I will actually do is I'll lay in something and then use do I have one here? Maybe not. I have, they're basically brushes that have water in them. Oh, here we go. it's basically a brush that has water in it.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I'll soften the edge of what I've painted with this water
Yeah.
brush. With clouds, I prefer to wet the paper, let it dry till it's just tiny bit damp, and then lay the color into it so it kind of blooms on its own, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not big on brush strokes in general. So this is one of my earliest watercolors.
So what's early? How long ago? Is it college?
After college.
Okay.
So maybe 10 years ago is when I really started liking watercolors, maybe 10, 12, something like that. Yeah.
And so, so this was an early piece, and it's sort of a different view for you, because you usually do water. I mean, you seem that, you know, you sort of gravitated to a few things. So what were you trying to capture here, you think? Was this sort of, you know, it's sort of a different view?
I think that, I mean, at this point, I was just painting a scene. It's probably actually a precursor to all my sketchbook, travel sketchbooks that I take around. I didn't actually have little books at that point. I just had paper and watercolors. I feel like I have for a long time liked the idea of traveling with it. So I feel like at this point I might have just had a black, either a tube of black watercolor or a little mini pan of black watercolor, and I was working with that because, I mean, if you have black, then or any color, you can just work black and white. And I'm very into the like high contrast. Like I want dark darks and light lights. In fact, almost none of my watercolors that I do now, I don't use black. I use the ultra saturated form of, the darkest is Payne's gray, which is, you know, very dark, but it is actually a blue. But I like to play the contrast, like lightest lights and darkest darks that you can go, and then everything else is in between. So, I mean, it's nice to look at an old piece and say, yep, I was doing it then, I'm still doing it.
Okay,
so these are some of the backdrops that are specifically clouds. The one on the left is from, it'll come to me. Designed by Beowulf Borrett. Why can't I think of it right now? Anyway, the one on the right is the one from Tally's Folly. So that was the one that we got the rendering from John Lee Beattie.
And how big are these? What's the scope of these?
Okay, so if you look in them, you can see stools in the background, or and the one on the right, in the kind of the mid to top left, there's like a brown rectangle. That's a door. So they are large scale. I think our deck is 36 by 52 feet. So that one from Tally's Folly is a little bit smaller.
Okay, so quite big, quite big.
Oh yeah, thank you, Michelle. Turning off the morning news is the other one to the left.
Okay, this one right here. This one right here.
Now, if you look at the picture, you can kind of see the ghosting of squares underneath the clouds.
Right in here?
Yeah, so if you look at a cloud, underneath it, you can see kind of a ghost of a black square, or like a rectangle.
Oh yeah,
What we did with that one is on the actual deck, this is a scrim as opposed to a piece of muslin. So what we did was we squared out where the cloud should be inside of that. We didn't draw out the cloud shape. We just said it should be inside this box.
I see.
And so the boxes aren't on the scrim, they're actually underneath it on the deck, and we could see.
So this, I think I see a box right here, right? I'm following a box right here. I just want to make sure I'm.
So that's how we did that. And that one we used a lot of like airbrushing. We airbrushed all the clouds on that one.
Okay, it's beautiful, really beautiful. Let's go to the next one here. More of your book.
Sketchbook. This is one of my sketches, Lake Champlain. And you can see I was terrible at water. And I went, you can actually see in different parts of it where I was like, oh, what if I try something different here?
Right, you're trying something here, which is different than what you tried here,
Yep.
which is different than you tried here.
Yep.
So you're sort of experimenting with different approaches, I guess, to sort of get it.
Exactly. So I was like, guess what's next? Water. So that's why I went on my water quest.
And how long did the water quest last? You did 77 clouds in a month. How did you play out the water?
So the water, because water's a lot more intense than clouds, in my opinion. And I didn't go as small. The smallest I went was 5x7s. And I want to say, when did I start my water? 2018 is when I started water. So there's a little baby one. But yeah, so I started with 5x7s and then worked my way up 8x10s, 11x14s, and now I'm doing big giant ones. There's something about water specifically as opposed to clouds that really makes my brain happy. I'm not sure what it is, but I just like the work.
Do you like the ocean also?
I like lakes more than I like the ocean.
Okay.
And I like lakes a lot more than I like the ocean. I'm not anti-ocean. I'm just more ocean in the spring or fall, or in the morning or the late night. I'm not a bake on the beach kind of person.
So is this on a lake? We're looking at another piece. Is this your?
Yeah, that would be more of a lake. A lot of these I work from research images. So yeah.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, it's a 5x7. You can see I'm learning.
Yeah.
They're obviously, all the water's a lot less specific than in my larger, newer pieces. So this is one of my water and cloudscapes.
It's incredibly brilliant color. Is this a scene you lived, or is this a scene you imagined?
These are research images.
Okay.
All my watercolor is about learning how to paint things. So I am trying to reproduce not so much colors. I actually, a lot of the colors I changed, like this was not this color. This was like a pasty weird blue. So I made it more of a green. It's not so much the colors that I take from research images, it's the shape of things. And I do, you know what I mean? Like maybe this big shape is accurate to the picture, but not every single wave, if that makes sense.
Of course.
But if you look into this painting that you have up, you can see the masking lines are very hard.
So right here.
Down a little bit farther. So see the waves there where the lines are really hard?
Yeah.
That was before I learned about my baby little scrubber brushes.
Okay.
So they're very harsh. It's all about learning. But
so these are good examples of that, right?
no, where the yellow.
For the yellow up here?
The lines are yellow are, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
So what I did was I painted the whole thing yellow, added my masking lines, and then painted the blues and the reds and the oranges.
Oh, interesting.
And then I peeled up the masking, and the yellow was left underneath. So,
Great.
yeah.
Okay. Let's scroll down to the next piece that you wanted to share tonight.
This one.
This is gorgeous.
Yeah. Lots of people like that one. I get a lot of laments. It was sold, and I get a lot of people lamenting. I've actually, since I've gone on a boat trip and I took a bunch of pictures, research images of my own while I was there, I'm almost positive that this is a boat wake. So I have a whole bunch of new research images of boat wakes. So hopefully I can make more paintings in a similar fashion now that I have gotten that.
And how do you determine the colors? I mean, it's just sort of the colors of this are so interesting and so dynamic. How do you determine the colors you're going to use?
Well, sometimes I play with an image on my computer in like Photoshop or something like that. And sometimes it's just what makes me happy. This one I think I played with a bit on my computer and then exaggerated it.
Yeah.
But like this one, it was just what I liked. I don't know. The colors are a lot less. I feel like a lot of things I do with my head And colors, I more just kind of go with my gut. I just kind of say, this works, this doesn't work. Most of my job is about something's not working. What is it? And then figuring out what's wrong. So if something's going wrong with color, I can usually figure out what it is and correct it.
And going wrong, what's the definition of going wrong? Just your eye doesn't see what you wanted to see?
Yeah, just something's, it's more like, okay, like these two colors aren't quite right. What wash can I put on them to make it right? And that, I think that's a lot more about aesthetically pleasing. Like, okay, this will be aesthetically pleasing. A lot of times with my recipes, it's more about you have like a base color, and then you can, for highlights, you can push it one way to yellow, and the other way you can push it blue, and you'll end up with green in the middle. A lot of it's that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure they are complementary colors. I just don't think about it that specifically. And it happens subconsciously.
And when you're creating something for the theater, how do you imagine and how do you execute with the differences in lighting and all the other variables that are different, you know, that they're going to impact the way the work that you're doing looks, you know? So you're picking colors, you're selecting colors, and you're trying to execute how it should look, but all the lighting and all the shadows and all the other things going on that stage are going to impact that so much. So how do you sort of process that so you create the right image that you want?
Well, a lot of that is about the designer and the director. Hopefully the conversation, if you have a good director who knows the designer, they will talk to each other. They will have figured that out through the lighting designer and all the other designers. We also can say to our team and say, hey, guess what? This drop is very saturated blue, which I know takes light in a weird way. Be aware of it. So we will talk amongst ourselves in the theater, but it's ultimately our job to kind of do what the designers want.
And so is the lighting designer involved in that conversation too? Or is that something that's sort of just separate and there's the designer, you know, there's magic happening?
We would hope that all the designers are talking to each other, but sometimes, I mean, and no matter what, once you put things on stage, it's about eyes looking at things on the stage. You can only hope or think about what something will look like, but once you put it on the stage and you hit it with lights, and everybody works together, like you say, oh, this purple is showing up weird under this light, can we tweak it? Or sometimes it'll be like this there's so much light in this one corner of the set because that's where an entrance is, can we kind of like darken the rest of it, because we need to put that much amount of light there because a person needs to be seen there, so we will correct it. Everybody's very collaborative about how to correct things and how to not correct things.
You know, it's so interesting. I mean, I think we all realize that, say, a new play, like especially a playwright that's premiering something, you know, on a stage, and there's sort of a world, you know, there's sort of a world unveiling of a play. We think of the fact that during that preview season, or that preview period, I should say, that there's work going on the script and the direction and all the other kinds of things and the actors and et cetera. But how much work is being done on the actual scenery that is so incredibly important in telling the story? Is that all moving, you know, each day or every couple of days as well, because of things that are happening and how they're looking at the lighting and whatever might be going on? Or by the time something's open, even in previews, is it sort of done?
Okay, so basically we do as much as we possibly can, as much as we can possibly think of in the shops before. Then we have a period called load in, which is us loading in the set. We're constructing it, putting it, hanging it, stretching it. And there's a lot of stuff that we do. Like I look at something and say, this is my note. Because the designer probably will notice it, or the director will probably notice, but there's a lot of stuff that we do for us too. We say, that's not right, I'm gonna fix it before anybody even tells me to.
Yep.
Then we get into tech, which is technical rehearsals, which means that it's basically when we run through the whole show with all the lights, with all the sound, with the actors, with entrances, with exits, with pyro, with food, with anything you can think of. It's the technical rehearsal. Then we usually do a dress, which is when we put it all together and cross our fingers. Usually it goes really well. And then once we go into previews, and previews we have not opened yet, but we are previewing it in front of audiences. Now, all through all of these processes, we can still make changes, sometimes large changes with new scripts. A lot of times there are still scenes being rewritten. There are different wardrobe that can happen. There's different props that can happen. We can change colors of things on stage. But once the show opens, we don't touch it again.
Okay. Interesting. So once the show opens, it's not touched.
Not unless something breaks, or like if something breaks, or if somebody like scratches a huge hole.
Right, right.
Like there are touch-ups, there are fixes if something
Right.
breaks, but we don't actively change anything.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go back again just to some of your work and share. So this is one we were just looking at, and somebody else, just texted something in the questions. And you've looked at clouds a lot, and you've looked at water, obviously. What about snow?
So like that one early baby picture.
Yeah, the one that was very contrast with
I
snow.
haven't done a ton with snow. Snow is very. I've actually been thinking not snow specifically, but of glaciers and icebergs, because that's it includes water, and it's more about that like crystalline. Those ones that are like, especially the glaciers and icebergs that have flipped, where they're really blue.
Yeah.
I've been really thinking about those. I guess I haven't been super drawn to snow, mostly because I feel like it's so subtle. And I'm into, like I said, I'm into big contrasts, but there's nothing to say that I won't. I kind of just go where my inspiration is, I guess. I don't know. I just kind of.
Well, funny enough, when I first saw this piece, I actually thought that it might be snow, until I realized that the caps of the waves are obviously not snow. But when I first glanced at this, I was like, is this like a sweep of snow, or is this forest or something? So I had my own sort of viewpoint of this, which was obviously not what you did. And then I was like, wait a second, of course this is, we're still in the water, activity, water series or whatever. So. Okay, let me pop to, I think we've got a couple more here that I want to share. Oops, wrong way.
Right, so this is me learning about sea foam.
Yeah, this is super realistic and so beautiful, honest God.
Yeah, I'm really happy with that. I have that piece here. I'm going to show you an early picture too.
Yeah, I'm gonna pop out so you become bigger, but I'd love to see it in person.
Okay, so this is my earlier attempt at sea foam.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but I had to fix it with a lot of white gouache.
Okay, because you use too much color, so
it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it means that I didn't figure it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that piece, the blue piece, which I also have over there, but you can probably see it better on that screen.
Okay, I'll pop back.
Without any gouache, but lots of scrubby brush.
Okay, we're going to share that screen again just so people can see this. So you're using a lot of that brush to sort of soften out the lines and sort of soften it out.
So the hottest spots I masked off first.
So that's,
I think I did 2 or 3 different washes of lighter. If you look here, I have it right here. So you keep that up, but I'll point.
Okay.
So into these areas down here.
Right in here.
Yeah, you can see multiple different wiggly layers.
Yeah.
That are different colors, right? So you have hot white, but then you also have like a lighter blue, and then a bit darker, and then a little greener.
So from
all
this,
of those are different layers of masking fluid that I put on.
So from this to this to this, right?
To the white, the hot.
And even here, and there's some less hot white sort of in here, right?
So all that was masking fluid. Then I went and did those really dark colors.
Yeah.
I pulled up the lab masking fluid with there are these little, they're like little erasers that you can pull up the masking fluid with. And then you use a wet scrubber brush and you kind of scrub them out so they're soft. Yeah. And then I added some darker patches back in. So yeah, this is a big learning experience.
And who you mentioned a teacher that you'd had through elementary school and high school. What about since then? I mean, I'm sure you had some professors in college, but since that, has it been mostly learning on your own and sort of this experimentation and this sort of series of experimentation? Or are you working with others, or sort of what's that look like?
Mostly, most of it's learning on my own, besides learning from Carrie. but that's scenic painting learning, but
And
that's still learning.
Tell us who, you've mentioned Carrie a couple times. Can you tell us who Carrie is again?
Carrie Ballinger, who Maria mentioned for the art of the script. She's the senior charge at McCarter. We actually both started our first year the same year, but she was in charge and I was a little baby painter. But so a lot of process and work ethic stuff I've learned from her. But as far as actual like watercoloring and stuff like that, that was self-taught. I also, someone who I really like, I actually mentioned it in the US1 interview, James Gurney, who is, I don't know if you know the Dinotopia books.
Oh yeah.
They are delightful. He wrote them and did all the art in them, which a lot of them are these beautiful oil paintings. And then there's also watercolor sketches and sketches that are kind of watercolors, but are actually done with oil washes. But he actually is, he's one of the people that I really, the time lapses. He does a lot of time lapses. He walks through his painting process. He talks through them. So a lot of stuff I've learned just from watching his videos and his blog, like reading his blog and stuff like that. So.
Great. So let's look at another piece that's very, in some ways very different and in some ways the same. So this is sort of reclaimed wood, I think, and then, you know, presenting art there. So tell us about, I guess, one, the collection of the wood and how you selected what you were going to use to then place images on, because I think that's very, to me, that's really super interesting. It's like, how did you select what this was, what that process was? Because that's the first step of the art. And then the second step of the art is actually putting what we would typically look at it and say, no, that's the art. So walk us through that process and why you sort of shifted from paper to wood and, you know, et cetera. So tell us about this.
Well, a lot of the wood stuff that I do came before watercoloring.
Okay.
I've watercolored, so my art either falls into pretty shiny, colorful watercolors or works on reclaimed woods with charcoals, and a lot of times there's gold leaf. I have a piece here I've done with resin, and you can see the shiny gold.
Oh yeah, we'll switch to that in just a second. Yes, we can
but
see
I'm
that.
just saying my work is either one or the other, and so a lot of stuff, especially working at the shop, the scene shop, is you get a lot of weird pieces of wood that come through. These might have been, this was something else. Some of them have been like the carpenters have cut up pieces of pallet wood, or because sometimes we get stuff shipped from a lot of places, so it's not just that gnarly, nasty wood. Some of it's kind of cool and weird. And very porous. So a lot of these paintings specifically, the paint kind of sinks into it. It doesn't sit up on the surface. It kind of like soaks in. And there's something that I like about that, and that very, very atmospheric, the way that it soaks in. I don't know. These paintings, I actually used latex paint. Which is a lot of what we use at McCarter for all of our painting. We use like latex paints, but that doesn't mean it's like, sometimes it's house paint on stage, but a lot of the paint that I use in this is actually, it's called, it's a product called Supersat. It's a super saturated latex paint, which means it has less binder and more color in it.
More pigment, sort of more pigment.
Yeah, so, well, is latex, it's not chalky the way that house paint can be. So a lot of it's a lot of water. If you go on my Instagram, you'll find videos of me doing these kind of paintings, and you'll see how much water it is. I basically wet the wood so that it's receptive, and then I put in the colors. In this one, the color's called Leather Lake. It's like a very nice orange.
Yes, beautiful. It's a beautiful tone.
Yeah.
So how do people find you on Instagram? That was a good pitch to find you on Instagram. So how do people find you?
My name, everything is Susan DiConcini. It's Susan DiConcini on Instagram. It's SusanDiConcini.com. It's Susan DiConcini on Facebook, although I'm not great at Facebook. It's Susan DiConcini on Twitter. That's my email address, SusanDiConcini@gmail.com. It's everything, because no one has my name. There was a senator's wife apparently once, but she died. So now, as far as I know, I'm the only one.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very unique. So let's, we've got a few more minutes, but not a lot. But why don't you spin us around your studio a little bit? Because I was, I love that sort of like the little spin we just did for a little while, a half an hour ago. So maybe you can show us a little bit more of your studio.
Okay. So it's a giant old drafting desk that I love, which I put masonite on it because I'm a bit messy, and that way I don't have to worry about getting paint anywhere. This is my sweet, adorable little velvet chair that I got for $5 at Habitat for Humanity, and Grant had to put legs on. I have since recently got, today, I don't know if you can see back there, I got a brand new air conditioner.
Congratulations.
Oh yeah. I have another work table here. I propped up some of my watercolors there, and also some of my resin pieces are down here, which are so shiny that you can't see what's going on.
Yeah, do you have a small one? I think you had one, a small one you were showing us a minute ago. We'll look at that
I
in a second.
do have, which is a crackle technique, which I learned at McCarter for like old crackly paint. So I did, there's gold leaf underneath it. There's a charcoal drawing underneath.
On paper? Is it on paper?
No, this is a piece of wood. It's
okay, but the charcoal
on the wood.
Piece is on the wood, okay.
And then I did highlights with some gold paint, gold leaf, and then plaster with this crackling. And because the crackle plaster would just shed forever, I actually started experimenting with resin to hold that in place. You can't really tell, but the crackle is actually kind of suspended in the resin.
Oh, that's cool. So that's a new thing you're doing.
It is something that's been in development for a while. So
okay.
I just last year started pouring these. Let's see if I can get a good.
Oh yeah.
So like they're very shiny, but they're very cool, and they're larger pieces. But yeah. So I also have. If you can see up here, this is a GoPro camera. So that's how I take all my GoPro. It points directly down at my thing. All my brushes are all here. Yeah. And then I have a desk here with a second monitor that I can attach to my thing, and a calendar, and
So you like such big scale.
Drawers and stuff like that. So yeah.
So you mentioned how much you like your scale. So outside of the theater, what's the biggest thing you've created, of scale that wasn't a theatrical piece?
Murals. I mean, I've painted murals places. I painted a mural at a school. I painted murals in children's bedrooms, family rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, the mural on the front of my house actually might be the biggest that I've done outside of. Yeah.
We should take a tour of that before it got dark out. So you've got a lot of great work. You have a lot of great work that's available on your website for collectors. And a couple of things. First of all, I want to remind everyone that this is the Arts Council of Princeton, and the Arts Council of Princeton is the sponsor this evening. And so we really would appreciate anybody who's enjoyed this evening to pop over to the Arts Council of Princeton.org and contribute. Every cent counts. $5, $500, $50, $10, whatever. Is really appreciated. This is a very difficult time for all nonprofits, including the Arts Council. So we really appreciate your generosity if you've enjoyed this evening and learning more about Susan's work. And Susan, you obviously have a website where you have a number of things that are available to people that love your work, as all of us do. And so I know you're also donating part of the proceeds to some organizations. You want to tell us about those this evening?
Yes. So I currently am out of work because McCarter has suspended a lot of their staff. So just know that. And so you can try and keep theater and arts organizations alive so that they can make it through this to the point where people want to come back to places so that I can get my job back. But also on top of that, it's hard to donate when you don't have a source of income. So this is one way that I know that I have a source, at least a small source of income, and I can give back. So right now, for the next month, I'm giving 10% to Arts Council of Princeton, but I'm also giving 10%, and this, I'm hoping this could last for a longer amount of time, as long as I can, to the Equal Justice Initiative and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and educational stuff. Both are really, really doing amazing work, especially with financial and legal help for people that have been wrongly incarcerated, or their sentences are ridiculously too long, or things like that. They also work with communities, impoverished communities that kind of bear the brunt of a little bit too much legality and I don't know, policing. Also, I want to shout out to if you are looking for places to donate, the Charity Navigator website is actually really awesome about because I bet a bunch of charities have just popped up out of the woodwork and you don't know where to donate. They actually rate them by how transparent they are and where all the funds go. So Charity Navigator is actually really amazing if you're looking about where to donate.
Really awesome, really awesome. And there's so many great places in sort of the greater Princeton area, you know, Trenton, Princeton, West Windsor. I mean, there's such great places to donate. In addition to the Arts Council and McCarter, you know, there's just so many great places around, the food banks that are in the community. I mean, we're really blessed and live in a community where people are very generous and very giving. And I think we're all very lucky for that. So we've gotten some great feedback. People have really enjoyed the last hour together. So what's next for you?
Well, my big shiny hope is that I could do some murals at a school. Nothing's been finalized, but the thought is that a lot of times if students specifically don't go to museums or follow artists specifically, the thought would be that the way that they interact with artists is through street art. So the thought would be that I could do installation things without any sort of knowledge. They just see it and have to make decisions about it. And it could be a conversation in their school community. Art teachers can talk about it, social sciences can talk about it, but it's like there's not an artist there saying, this is what I mean by this. It just splatter something, put an installation somewhere and see what people think. And if it gets defaced, that's part of it, because that's part of street art. So that's what I'm going to try and push for, because I think it'd be really an interesting conversation, and to be not known, like become the Banksy of the school, or, you know, make up a name, do a hashtag or something like that. But because that's honestly how a lot of people interact with art. If they're not actively seeking it out, that's how they interact with it. So hopefully that's a thing that I can do in the meantime.
I love that concept. I love public art. You know, we're doing a number of public art pieces as part of the Artists in Residence program at Princeton at the Arts Council. And also you've got a show coming up, I think, at the Arts Council in the spring. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And then we'll...
It is with another artist. Both of us do water in a very different way. So we thought the thought was that it'd be really cool for us to do them in tandem. So yeah, I'm going to continue making large pieces. I actually have a roll of watercolor paper that's on its way that is 44 inches by 10 yards. So I can kind of make pieces as big as I want. This is pretty much, this piece here is the biggest piece of watercolor paper that you can buy. So if I want to go bigger than this, I need to buy a roll. So that's, yeah.
We look forward to seeing what you do with those 30 feet. You said how it was 30 feet, right? 10 yards?
Yeah, 10 yards by 44 inches, something like that.
Well, we'll come back and visit. Maria, you want to do a little wrap up here?
Sure. Yeah, here I am.
Great.
A little bit dark, but so Susan will be showing at the Arts Council with Lainey Packett-Morante, who was a former guest with Tim on In Conversation. So that will be coming up in March and April of 2021. And hopefully we'll be open and back to somewhat normal. But Susan, yeah, I loved your comment about doing a mural outside and having people come and I think you said deface it, but I always think of that as like enhancing it, as like adding what they think to it right then and there. So that was an interesting comment. But I think we can all agree that you are amazingly, amazingly talented. And just in awe of what you can do with paint on so many levels. And you talk more like a scientist, because you kept saying the word research it. And boy, do you research it. It's just, you paint it over and over and over and over, and all your little studies are so amazing. So
I think that in another life I could have been a scientist.
Yeah, and that's really
more how my brain works. It's I do experiments. Everything's an experiment. Everything's about learning. So
that's really admirable, and you go after that subject and you go after it wholeheartedly. So this has been a terrific show. Tim, thank you so much once again, and Susan, thank you. That was really, really interesting, and you really set the bar quite high. So we applaud you. Our next in conversation is going to be with painter Mario Moore, and that will be Mario is an amazing painter, and he will be interviewed by James Stewart from the Princeton University Art Museum, introduced by Tim, and that comes up on July 7th. So everybody, please tune in for that, and thank you so much for watching. And as Tim said, please try to support us where you can. Support Susan, just support artists, support art centers and theaters, because we are all sort of struggling through this, but we're finding our way. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you on July 7th.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much, Susan. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for asking me. This was great.
Great.
Night, everybody.
Good night.